Chris Kreider is once again the subject of trade rumors, and as a longtime supporter of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I can't help but wonder whether his potential move to Toronto could actually be a good fit. On the surface, the 33-year-old winger seems like an ideal candidate to add some much-needed scoring depth for a team like the Leafs, who are constantly striving to bolster their roster for a serious Stanley Cup run. However, when we dig a little deeper into Kreider's recent performance, things begin to look a lot less appealing. Kreider's name has been floating around the trade market for a while now, and nearly every playoff contender has reportedly expressed interest. It's no surprise that teams would want a player with his credentials. After all, he is a former 50-goal scorer. But what's been troubling is that Kreider's 2021-2022 season, in which he scored 52 goals, now looks like a career outlier. In fact, if we take a step back and look at his career, that 50-goal campaign stands as a glaring anomaly compared to his previous performances. Before that massive season, Kreider had never topped 30 goals in any given year. His goal-scoring production had been steadily improving, but it was still far from the elite status one would expect from a player commanding such a hefty contract. And while he did manage to score 39 goals last season, his numbers have drastically fallen off this year. In 30 games, Kreider has only managed 11 goals, a sharp decline that raises serious questions about his ability to maintain consistent offensive production. Now, as a die-hard Leafs fan, I can't help but look at Kreider's situation with some concern. Not only is he aging, at 33 years old, he's hardly a spring chicken, but he's also still under contract for 2 more seasons at a hefty $6.5 million per year. For a player whose production has clearly plateaued, that contract is a major red flag. Even if Kreider were to return to form, the Leafs would still be saddled with his large cap hit for the foreseeable future. This is where the trade talk becomes especially intriguing and, dare I say, perplexing. The New York Rangers, who have been actively shopping Kreider, are likely in no position to receive a valuable return for him. Given his age, declining production, and massive contract, they may end up receiving nothing more than a bag of pucks and goalie pads in exchange for their aging winger, much like the underwhelming return they got for Jacob Trouba a few seasons ago. As much as I understand the need for the Leafs to add a scoring winger, especially one with the pedigree of Kreider, I have serious doubts about the wisdom of making such a trade. Kreider's cap hit would create significant financial strain on the Leafs, who are already managing a tight salary cap with a number of high-profile players on their roster. More importantly, the Leafs have a clear need for players who can contribute immediately, not a player whose best years may already be behind him. With the salary cap set to increase next season, there may be some temptation to consider taking on Kreider's contract. But when you factor in his declining performance, the 2 years left on his deal, and the potential for more attractive options to become available as the trade deadline approaches, it becomes increasingly difficult to justify the move. Bringing Kreider on board for 2 more years of middling production just doesn't seem like the right move for the Leafs, even as they chase their elusive Stanley Cup dreams. Let's take a moment to put this in perspective. The Leafs already have one of the most talented rosters in the NHL, but they continue to search for ways to improve, particularly in the depth scoring department. Adding a player like Kreider may seem like a quick fix, but that fix could come with more baggage than it's worth. Rather than gambling on an aging winger with a massive cap hit, the Leafs would be better served by exploring other options. Players on expiring contracts, perhaps, who could provide an immediate impact without the long-term financial commitment. In my mind, the best course of action for Brad Treliving, Toronto's general manager, would be to stay patient. It's tempting to make a splash at the trade deadline, but that kind of short-term thinking can sometimes lead to long-term regrets. There will almost certainly be better options available as the season progresses, and Treliving should be prepared to strike when the right opportunity presents itself. After all, the Leafs are in a championship window, and adding a player like Kreider, with all of his potential risks, could jeopardize their long-term goals. At the end of the day, Kreider is a player with a proven ability to score goals. There's no denying that. However, the question that needs to be asked is whether his production is sustainable, and whether it makes sense for the Leafs to take on his contract for the next 2 years. If Kreider were a rental player, the situation might be different, but that's simply not the case here. His long-term commitment to a team would carry risks that the Leafs may not be willing to take on at this stage of their championship pursuit. If the Leafs are truly set on adding a winger, they would be better off focusing on a player with an expiring contract, someone who can contribute immediately but won't have the financial burden of a long-term deal. That way, the team can stay nimble in the cap space department while still strengthening their roster for a deep playoff run. The trade deadline is fast approaching, and the Leafs need to be strategic in their decisions. Kreider may be an appealing option to some, but for a team like the Leafs, the potential costs far outweigh the rewards. In the high-stakes game of NHL roster building, patience is often the best strategy. The Leafs have the pieces in place to win now, there's no need to rush into a trade that could end up costing them more than they're willing to pay. So, let's hope that Brad Treliving takes a step back and evaluates the bigger picture. The Leafs don't need a flashy, expensive acquisition right now. Instead, they need a move that strengthens their lineup without compromising their long-term flexibility. Chris Kreider is a player who may have once been a dynamic scorer, but with his age and contract weighing heavily on him, he's not the answer to Toronto's playoff ambitions. The Leafs' path forward is a careful, calculated one. Let's hope they make the right call as the deadline looms. The question of acquiring a player like Chris Kreider is also tied to the specific needs of the Toronto Maple Leafs. The team has been consistent in recent seasons but continues to face the same obstacles: a lack of offensive depth and a defensive system that needs to be more robust in order to achieve the coveted Stanley Cup title. While some view Kreider as a potential solution to this problem, it's important to analyze how he would fit into the team's system. Kreider's playing style, which emphasizes the use of his speed and strength to create offensive opportunities, could be intriguing in certain contexts. However, on a team with high-level players like Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander, the need for a player who complements the core of stars and, at the same time, can add something new becomes even more evident. Kreider has not demonstrated the consistent offensive production necessary to be a key player alongside these stars. Another important point is the question of the locker room and team chemistry. Toronto has a solid group, with experienced leaders like John Tavares and Morgan Rielly, and this has been crucial to their stability and performance in recent seasons. The arrival of a veteran player like Kreider could, in some cases, bring new energy, but there is also the risk that he may not adapt to the team's style and mentality. Chemistry in the locker room is one of the most underrated aspects of a successful season, and any change in that sense needs to be carefully considered. In terms of cap space, the Maple Leafs are already in a delicate position. With hefty contracts and financial commitments to their stars, the team needs to be strategic in how it uses its salary cap. Bringing in Kreider, with a $6.5 million contract for 2 more seasons, could jeopardize their ability to make adjustments to the roster in the future, especially if the cap doesn't increase as much as expected. For a team already filled with stars, adding another expensive contract could be a luxury the team cannot afford. Moreover, the winger position is not necessarily one of the Leafs' most urgent needs at the moment. The team has a well-balanced forward group, with the ability to rotate different combinations of forwards. If the goal is to add offensive depth, there are other options on the market that could be more effective without the need for a large financial commitment, such as players on expiring contracts or even a prospect from within the organization who might be ready to make the leap. And if the issue is simply adding more goals, the trade market offers a variety of players in different price ranges and with different skill sets. Players like Timo Meier or James Van Riemsdyk, for example, could be interesting options for the Leafs, with a smaller financial impact and the potential to contribute to the immediate cause. While Kreider is a good player, he is not the only possible reinforcement for a team aiming for the Stanley Cup.